Approaches directed at specific forms of aggression and violence. In addition to strategies designed to reduce aggression and violence across a wide range of domains, custom-tailored approaches have been developed to address specific forms of aggression. To illustrate these approaches, this section offers a brief review of strategies directed at 3 types of aggression: gang violence, aggression in the family, and sexual aggression. Preventing aggression in the family. The experience of family aggression may lead to a wide range of negative consequences that affect the victim's future development in many ways. See Chapter 8. Therefore, finding effective ways of preventing aggression against children, partners, and elders is a primary concern of practitioners and policymakers, and researchers can provide a basis for achieving this goal. Just as theories of family aggression were classified as pertaining to the macro level, the micro level, or the individual level in Chapter 8, prevention strategies designed can be located at these levels. Societal level interventions. Changing the societal conditions that allow family violence to occur requires, first and foremost, establishing a consensus that violence is not acceptable. Jellies, 1997, noted that we need to cancel the hitting license in society, and Schwartz and Descaretti, 2008, stressed the widespread peer support for violence as a major factor in explaining violence against women. Challenging the societal acceptance of aggression involves measures directly related to domestic violence, such as creating an awareness that corporal punishment is not an adequate child-rearing technique. It also includes wider issues, such as restricting the availability of firearms and challenging media presentations of violence as masculine, entertaining, and ultimately rewarding. See Chapter 6. It further requires the removal of the traditional gender gap in the distribution of power, both within relationships and in society at large. To the extent that social structures become more egalitarian, e.g. by providing equal pay and job opportunities, women will gain a stronger position in society, and patriarchal attitudes will become less influential. One specific way in which family violence can be tackled at the societal level is by means of the legal system. Legal regulations have been introduced to enhance the protection of victims and improve the detection of domestic violence. For example, many countries now have the instrument of imposing restraining orders on individuals who have used or threatened to use violence against an intimate partner. That often increases violence toward the partner who takes out the restraining order. This instrument prohibits abusers from getting close to the persons they threaten to attack and enforces legal sanctions on those who violate the order. Other legal regulations are designed to increase the likelihood of criminal prosecution of domestic violence offenders in the form of warrantless arrests or mandatory arrest policies in cases of domestic violence. In their review of criminal justice responses to violence, Goodman and Epstein, 2011, described these efforts as highly successful. Evaluations of success are mostly based on official records, indicating increases in the number of arrests and criminal prosecutions in domestic violence incidents. At the same time, there have also been critical voices. For example, critics have argued that restraining orders may serve to escalate rather than de-escalate domestic conflicts because they create frustration, and that mandatory arrest policies have increased the number of victims arrested alongside the aggressor. The file analysis by Mueller et al. 2009 showed that temporary restraining orders in cases of low-level intimate partner aggression were more likely to be granted to female than to male applicants, leading those authors to ask whether men are discriminated against as targets of aggression by female partners. However, this imbalance may also reflect the fact that men's aggression towards intimate partners is more likely to lead to injuries than is women's aggression, as discussed in Chapter 8. With regard to the protection of children from experiencing aggression in the family, banning physical punishment by law is an example of macro-level efforts to prevent family violence. Finland was the second country in the world after Sweden to introduce legislation to criminalize the physical punishment of children. Reviewing the rates of corporal punishment reported by participants born before and after this change in the law, Osterman et al., 2014, found a significantly lower prevalence rate of physical punishment in the younger cohort. However, as noted as a limitation with other quasi-experimental studies reviewed in this chapter, it is not possible to attribute the difference conclusively to the legal ban on physical punishment because other variables related to a reduction in physical punishment may also have changed in the period covered by the study. Whereas criminalizing corporal punishment is a measure of primary prevention, seeking to reduce the prevalence in the population as a whole, introducing mandatory reporting of suspected cases of abuse as a legal tool for addressing family violence is a measure of secondary prevention, seeking to discover a greater number of cases and reduce the recurrence of violence against family members. Mandatory reporting laws put professionals, such as social workers, medical staff, and mental health professionals, under a legal obligation to report suspected cases of abuse. The introduction of mandatory reporting of childhood abuse, as well as elder abuse, has led to a substantial increase in the number of recorded cases of alleged abuse. Levesque, 2011. However, a large proportion of cases are later dropped as unsubstantiated, raising the question of unintended side effects associated with this measure. If mandatory reporting is to expose cases of abuse that would otherwise have gone unrecognized, while at the same time keeping the number of false alarms low, it is essential that the professionals mandated to report abuse are sufficiently well educated about the different forms of abuse to read the warning signs and to avoid raising false alarms. Liu and Vaughn, 2019. The third approach for dealing with domestic violence at the societal level consists of improving protective services that offer support to the victims. Measures include the provision of sheltered accommodation for women and children who have suffered domestic violence, regular visits by social workers to families identified as at risk to preempt the development of abusive situations, provisions for placing abused children and elders into high-quality care, and providing treatment programs for the perpetrators of abuse. Beyond offering safe places, shelters can also provide effective interventions to improve victims' mental health. The demand for shelters for victims of family violence cannot be met by the number of available places, as experts from a wide range of countries agree. For Europe, Article 23 of the so-called Istanbul Convention on Violence Against Women recommends safe accommodation in specialized women's shelters available in every region with one family place per 10,000 members of the population. Council of Europe, 2011. Evaluating the effectiveness of such macro-level responses to family violence is difficult, not least because the criteria for success are hard to define. For example, it is almost impossible to establish whether the introduction of restraining orders causes rates of intimate partner homicide to decline, given the many factors that affect the incidence of such assaults. Similarly, it is hard to decide whether mandatory reporting leads to an increased rate of detection of genuine child abuse cases that outweighs the increase in the number of false alarms. In the case of intimate partner violence, it has been argued that mandatory reporting laws may undermine the autonomy of victims and reduce the likelihood of help seeking. Lippi et al., 2019. Family-level measures. Measures directed at preventing abuse or ameliorating its consequences by influencing the microsystem of the family focus on changing dysfunctional interaction patterns. Staggs and Shu, 2011. The first step in this approach is the development of instruments for identifying families at risk for child abuse. One such measure is the Parenting Stress Index, PSI. Abedin, 1995. The short form of the PSI consists of two subscales: personal distress, captured by items such as I feel trapped in parenting responsibilities, and child-rearing stress, including items such as my child does not like me or want to be close. Haskett et al., 2006. The higher parents scored on these scales, the less sensitivity to their children's needs they displayed, as observed in standardized parent-child interactions. Another widely used measure is the Child Abuse Potential Inventory, CAPI, Milner and Wimberly, 1980, which measures 3 parental risk factors for child abuse: rigidity, unhappiness, and problems with child and self. Milner and Wimberly, 1980, showed that scores on the CAPI were able to discriminate between abusive and non-abusive parents. Once families have been identified as at risk for abuse, behavioral family interventions can set in as strategies as secondary prevention for preventing the recurrence of abuse. Turner and Sanders, 2006. Parenting programs such as the P Positive Parenting Program seek to improve the quality of the parent-child relationship and promote positive parenting behavior. Thomas and Zimmer-Gembach, 2011, evaluated a parent-child interaction training in families with a history of child maltreatment. Recognizing the dynamic interaction of parent and child behavior, the training was aimed at both parents, promoting self-confidence in their parenting skills and changing attributions about their child's problem behavior, and children, reducing their externalizing behavior. Critical variables of parent and child behavior were measured before the start of the intervention and 12 weeks after the end of the intervention. Parents in the intervention group were observed to show an increase in positive behaviors towards their children and reported a significant decrease in their child's externalizing behavior from pre-test to post-intervention, whereas no change was observed in the waiting list control group. A meta-analysis of 37 studies evaluating the efficacy of parenting programs in reducing child maltreatment found an effect size of D equals 0.30. Significant effects were also found on some risk factors for maltreatment, such as attitudes about corporal punishment, parenting stress, and relationship between parents, but not on parental depression. Another meta-analysis of 14 studies found a modest but significant reduction in the recurrence of physical abuse of 11% in trained versus untrained parents. Velikovica et al. 2017. However, the reviews also reveal a substantial variation in the methodological rigor of the available studies. So the overall findings should be interpreted with that limitation in mind. User et al. 2015. Individual level interventions. At this level, the focus of interventions is on the individual person who commits aggressive acts towards a family member. Many interventions are directed at men who physically or sexually assault their female partners, and participation is often mandated by a court. Several approaches have been developed and evaluated in the literature. The first is the psychoeducational approach, designed to increase men's understanding of the detrimental effects of violence and to challenge role perceptions of male power or dominance. The second approach draws on cognitive behavioral therapy to help abusers to unlearn violent behavior through improving their communication skills and anger management. The rate of recidivism by participants in intervention programs is the main criterion by which intervention success is evaluated, and the current evidence regarding this outcome is inconclusive. For example, the review of 17 studies by Kurt et al. 2019 found that self-reported rates of violence against a partner dropped from pre to post-intervention, but the 3 studies that conducted randomized controlled trials to compare the intervention group to a control group did not yield significant differences. Moreover, a meta-analytic review by Arias et al. 2013 found that recidivism rates assessed by reports of the couples involved were significantly higher than rates taken from official crime records, highlighting the impact of methodological decisions on the conclusions reached about program effectiveness. The authors suggest that official records may be lower because victims may be afraid to report partner violence for fear of further victimization. A further meta-analysis of educational and skill-based interventions to address relationship violence in young people aged 12 to 25 years found no evidence of intervention effects in terms of changing attitudes, behavior, and relationship skills. Fellmouth et al. 2013. In addition to treating aggressors, interventions can be directed at potential victims of family violence to enable them to better protect themselves from the risk of aggression. This approach is exemplified by programs directed at the prevention of childhood sexual abuse, CSA, both within and outside the family. Educational programs have been designed to empower children to resist sexual exploitation, e.g., by teaching them to enforce their right to privacy, to be assertive in rejecting unwanted touch, and to seek support from other adults, DeCampo and Favreau, 2019. The outcome measures in most of the evaluation studies are changes at the level of social skills and cognitive variables, such as knowledge about sexual abuse, perception of risk, self-protection, and willingness to disclose abuse experiences. Although they found substantial variation in program success in their review of 24 studies evaluating school-based interventions, Topping and Barron, 2009, concluded that participation in sexual abuse prevention programs leads to moderate increases in the targeted knowledge and skills variables, at least immediately after the intervention. A study by Craigie and Napper, 2009, that evaluated a theater play for elementary school children found positive intervention effects that were sustained over a period of 30 weeks. Meta-analytic reviews have found little evidence that the programs have detrimental side effects, such as frightening or upsetting children, Walsh et al. 2015. However, it must be noted there is virtually no evidence on the efficacy of CSA prevention programs in reducing the number of children who become victims of sexual abuse. Whereas the sexual abuse prevention programs are primary interventions designed to prevent victimization in unselected samples of children, other reviews focused on interventions targeting victims of intimate partner aggression. Such programs are tertiary interventions designed to offer therapy to ameliorate the consequences of the victimization experience and to empower victims to seek effective help and resist re-victimization. While a systematic review of 57 studies showed such interventions to be successful overall, the efficacy varied depending on different outcomes, Trebold et al. 2018.